Hello there. This is April the 11th, 2023, and I have a question from Bob in San Diego. This is with regards to Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. These were the last words that Jesus was expressing to his disciples as he was sending them out into the world. So let me take a look at the question here. This is from Bob. He says, I have a question about a statement that Jesus made in Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. Bob has listened to the radio archive about the Sermon on the Mount, and my view that Jesus laid down a standard that is not possible for us to follow, and he intentionally did this to bring us to the realization that in our own power or works, we can't really do what he taught us to do in that sermon. And so the only hope that we have is to accept the finished work of Jesus and be led by the Spirit. Yes, that is my view. I would like to think that it's more than just my view. If there's anybody who has an alternate point of view, then what I would say is, well, then you better believe it. All right? So whatever your view is, if it's different from that view, then believe it, I mean, really, really embrace it. Because I think that the reason why people don't have that view is because they are not sincere, they are dishonest, they are manipulative, and I could come up with a whole lot of other words that could probably be used in order to describe the kinds of people who have an alternate point of view than this. And it's not because I just want people to believe whatever I believe. Not from that perspective. To me, that is the only view that could be defined by that, because anything else will require you to be as perfect as God. All right? So if you want to do that, go ahead, and when you fail, then come back and embrace this point of view, because there just isn't any alternative. So please don't. Try. I'm a little bit sensitive about these. The way that sometimes people will write me questions, things like, well, you think, well, yeah, that's of course, but seriously. All right, so. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, let's go up to verse 19. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. All right, now in verse 19, he's sending them out to make disciples of all nations. That word baptizing, that's a transliteration. It should be translated, which would mean to immerse them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. I do have a series of programs on the subject of baptism that you can find in the radio archive as well, in addition to the Sermon on the Mount, which is what was inspiring this question. All right, now let's consider the option, all right, of teaching them all things that has been commanded. Okay, now it shouldn't take you very long to realize that if it's going to be all things, well, then it better be all things. And so you would be expected to go into all the world and say, well, here are the words of Jesus. In fact, you can get Bibles that have it in red, the red letter editions. I have some of those. I think they're great. And you can say, look, these are the words of Jesus. This is what he commanded. This is what has been documented that we know of. And so you are to obey, anything and everything that Jesus has had to say. All right, now, like I said, if a person is going to be devoted to that, then they need to be devoted to that. And not just pretend and not just play around, but really try to do it all so that they will eventually realize that they cannot. Okay? So if Jesus wants this to be presented to the whole world, then it would be presented to the whole world and it would have that effect. All right? So, by all means, go out and tell people that this is what Jesus had to say. This is what he taught. And, and give it your best effort. Give it your best shot. And through that process of struggling with the law, then a person will be moved more and more into the direction of eventually coming to the end of themselves and being able to embrace the new covenant that has gone into effect. All right? And so if we just take it at face value and encourage this to be done, then by all means, do it, and it should have that end result. Okay? If you are going to obey all that Jesus had, the only way you could is if you are God manifested in the flesh. That obviously is not the case, So, except with strange perspectives that some people seem to have, like, well, now this is what your view is. So I'm not picking on you, Bob. It's just I get this from so many other people, Just it can really wear you out after a while. It's like, what is it? I mean, you just a lot of these people, they just don't want to believe the truth, and so they're looking for some way that they can say that I'm distorted, I'm a crazy person or something, and so see, Aaron's a crazy person, so we don't have to believe anything that might sound anything like anything that he believes, So we got an excuse. This is where a lot of that ends up coming from, which. I just get on with my life. I don't really dwell on that too much, but sometimes I get a little bit too many people in one day that it can kind of wear you out. All right. So, if we go out into the world and we present it from that point of view, then of course that's going to be the case. All right. Now, if you look through the radio archive for Living God Ministries, for example, you'll see a lot of content there where I'm teaching through the things that Jesus said. The verse by verse study that I did through the book of John is a more involved example of me teaching people to obey all that he has said. And again, if a person is in that state where they're not really ready to embrace the new covenant, then of course I'm going to teach them to embrace the old, whatever it takes based on wherever they are at in their life at that time. It would be nice if I could do the other three gospels. That's just, but that's a lot of work. And believe it or not, I require donations, I just do. And I do the best I can with what I've got. But, there's often times when I think it's time for me to go find a new line of work. It's really hard to do. And so I can't plan or project. I'm just trying day by day in order to get as far as I have gotten and to do what I can do. I could do a whole lot more. It's just that I have to spend a whole lot of time doing other stuff just to try to keep the donations coming in, which is a real pain. But, at least it's working to some extent. So I don't know, if I'll live long enough to be able to do the other three Gospels. I would really like to spend a lot of time with the Gospel of Matthew. I have several copies of the Gospel of Matthew in Hebrew, and I would just love to be able to sit down and go through that. But the funding for that is enormous. In order to put the time towards that, I'm just not sure how I can really do it in that way. So I'm shying away from that. Maybe I could do Luke next. Mark, in Mark's gospel, most everything is stuff that you can find in the other gospels. So I'm not all that enthusiastic about doing Mark, but I'll do it at some point if I'm still alive. I can do that. But there's still a lot to do. So if you look at the content that I've already produced, of course I'm teaching all that Jesus said. And I'm going through it word by word, verse by verse. I'm doing it as I am able, and the way that I have archived it, it'll be available for every generation from now on who speaks English. Okay, it'll be available. It would be good if I could learn other languages, perhaps, and do some translating that might be useful to the majority of the world. If I was to do that as well, but. That's another project as well. So you can see that I am determined to teach all that Jesus had to say. I do that, and I would like to do that even more, and to obey certainly in that context. I think that's a wonderful thing, and that should be a part of every believer's experience of growing in the faith, that they should study all that Jesus has commanded and to understand what he said and why, and to obey as it is applicable, which mainly has to do with the idea of believing and trusting and relying on all that he has done for them. All right. Now there have been some occasions in the past when I have done this in more of a public way. For example, before I started the radio ministry, I was pastoring a church, and I pastored that church for 17 years. And when I was doing that, when I first got started, I went and I visited a congregation that was meeting on Friday evenings. And I was just there, just to do something on Friday nights, for the most part. And on occasion, I could have conversations with people that might turn out to be useful. But, for the most part, when I was there, I'd bring a book to read or, work on what I was going to talk about on Sunday morning or something. It's just a, sort of a hangout kind of thing to do. But after a while, the circumstances changed a little bit. What happened was that they couldn't close out their evening service because they traditionally would give the Aaronic blessing. And nobody could find the little note card, that had the blessing on it in this transliterated Hebrew of some kind. And it was going on and on. They were looking all over the place. It was, desperation. This was before the internet, as accessible as it is now. And so, of course, nobody's going to just bring it up on their phone, But it was going on for a while, and I was getting kind of tired. I thought, I just want to go home. So I just asked, would you like me to just give the blessing? And they said, okay, yeah, sure. So I get up and I give the blessing. Now, of course, this was in a way that no one had ever encountered before. If you go to my other channel, Aaron Budgen, this is being uploaded to Aaron Budgen Live. If you go to the other channel, Aaron Budgen, I did recently post a presentation of the Aaronic blessing. And that's what I did. And so it didn't take very long after that, before they started asking me to teach every other week and then to teach every week. But this is what they did. They said, now, Aaron, we'd like you to try teaching here on Friday evenings for us. But the requirement is that you teach through the law of Moses through the rabbinical cycle. Which means teach through the law of Moses in a year, according to the schedule that the rabbis had put together to go through the law of Moses in a year. I said, sure, that's easy. Yeah, okay. So I did. I got in there, and I taught through the law of Moses. They said, you got 30 minutes. I said, okay, I'll take 30 minutes. So for the first 20 minutes, I taught the law. I did. All that, that would fit into the category of all that Jesus commanded you to obey. I sure did, yes. I did. I taught the law so well, that you could see the people sinking in their chairs. It was always a fun thing for me, to beat them down with the law. Give them the law. Yeah, you want the law, I'll give it to you. So they would sink in many ways into their chairs as I would, give them the law, especially as I could connect it with what Jesus had to say. And then after, about 20 minutes went by, then I would spend the next 10 minutes and I would turn to the New Testament and most of the time to the letters that Paul wrote, and I would explain the fulfillment related to those laws. And you could see them kind of, get up out of their chairs a little bit, rise up a little bit, not sit so slouched and so ashamed. And then, at the end, it wasn't unusual for them to stand up and applaud, So, you want me to teach the law? Sure, I'll teach the law. I'll do that. And so, I did that, and it was productive. it went pretty well. I did have an effect on some people, but then when circumstances started to change kind of in a rough way, then I realized I'm going to have to pull out, and I better do it real soon. Then I pulled out, and that was the end of that experience. So I'm giving you just an example of sure, today, absolutely, would I teach the law of Moses? I've done that, and if the circumstances warranted it, or if I had a good opportunity to do it again, I probably would. But not without the rest of what Jesus had to say, and not without the rest of the implications of what Jesus did when he died and rose from the dead. All right, so I hope that that's helpful. That's probably just a good start for this passage. If you have any other questions for me, do send them to me directly by email to aaron@aaronbudgen.net. Thanks.